Welcome to today's Crosspoint Devotion. Now today we're going to talk about a topic that's going to be kind of personal, and I want to apologize up front because it's going to hurt your feelings and it's probably going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. But don't worry, I felt the same way when God convicted me about the same thing. You and I all have people with whom we have conflict. That's just the nature of living on this earth in a sin-dominated world. It is almost impossible to have perfect relationships with the people on this earth because sin just somehow gets involved in the equation, and it always causes us to get kind of crossways with people. In fact, some people get so crossways with us and they hurt us or they offend us or maybe they betray us in such a powerful way that we begin to consider them our enemies. Now here's the real problem where we have to struggle a little bit today. When you have an enemy, have you ever been guilty of kind of wishing that something bad would happen to your enemy? I'm just going to go ahead and confess. I've had a few people that I considered enemies, and when they were going through some difficult times or challenging times, or they had something misfortunate happen to them, inside I kind of wanted to celebrate. I kind of wanted to go, hey, they got what was coming to them. I couldn't give it to them, but somebody else did. And so there's just this natural human tendency, because we want to make ourselves look a little better than our enemies, that when our enemies experience bad things, we like to celebrate. We like to gloat. We kind of like to probe a little bit and say, look what happened to you. You deserved it. Did you know that in the Book of Proverbs, God reminds us that His wisdom says it's not okay for us to gloat when our enemy fails. It's not okay to make fun of our enemy when they're going through problems. It's just not something that's very becoming of a person who's trying to follow God, because God just doesn't really want anyone to experience misfortune and the effects of sin. And this is how it's phrased. Again, remember, I told you it's not going to be easy in this devotion, because as we follow Jesus, He's going to challenge us to get rid of some old ways in our life. And I think that desire to gloat over our enemies is one of those old ways from our sinful past that we like to kind of bring with us. Yeah, we'll follow Jesus as long as we don't have to give up gloating over our enemies. But the wisdom of God says in the Book of Proverbs, that's just not acceptable to God. Proverbs chapter 24, verse 17. You may want to take your copy of God's Word to read this and highlight it for yourself. I'm sure Sarav's going to put it on the screen right beside me so you can see it right here on the video. Don't gloat when your enemy falls, and don't let your heart rejoice when he stumbles. If I were in charge of writing the Bible, I would probably cut this verse out. It would just make me feel better, and it probably would make you feel better and make a lot of other people feel better, because it's just something we like to do, gloat and have fun when our enemies fail. But listen again to verse 17. Don't gloat when your enemy falls, and don't let your hearts rejoice when he stumbles. And then the next part reminds us why. Or the Lord will see and be displeased, and turn His wrath away from him. That's a pretty tough verse for us to consider. That God may be using some form of discipline against our enemies. He's carrying out His wrath against someone who's done wrong. But if we celebrate that, we're just as guilty as the person who's experiencing God's displeasure. So today I just wanted to kind of challenge you to think about your own walk with the Lord. He's wanting to transform us to look like Jesus. And if you remember, when Jesus was on the cross, He looked down at those who had turned Him over to Pilate, and He looked down at the crowd of those who had crucified Him. And what did He say? "Ooh, I'm here to gloat over these people who are going to be defeated shortly with my resurrection." That's not what He said. He said, "Father, forgive them, because they do not know what they do." If that's the pattern of Jesus with His enemies who crucified Him, then now you can see why Proverbs 24 verses 17 and 18 make a lot of sense. We're trying to look like Jesus, and gloating over our enemies just doesn't cut it when you follow Him. And so again it says, don't gloat when your enemies fall, and don't let your heart rejoice when he stumbles, or the Lord will see and be displeased and turn His wrath away from him. Devotions can be challenging. Today's one of those, but if we want to follow Jesus faithfully, let's try to forgive, forget, and move on and not gloat. Well, I hope that'll encourage you in your journey with Jesus. Hope you have a great day, even though it's kind of hard to handle sometimes. But nonetheless, come back and join us for the next Crosspoint Devotion.